10 Kids, No Pets by Ann M. Martin. Copyright 1988. Chapter 5, Gardenia. For Gardenia and Faustine, the very best thing about moving to the farm was the outdoors. There was really nothing like it. Deanie couldn't get over the way an early November morning in the country felt. Sometimes she stepped onto the back porch in her robe and slippers so that she could sniff the air while the sky was still gray. On school mornings, she and her brothers and sisters usually woke up just as the sun was rising. From the back stoop, Deanie watched the clouds on the horizon change from gray to silvery pink and saw the golden rays of sunshine slice through them, turning the frost on the grass beyond them to platinum before melting it away. The air was biting cold. Deanie could see her breath and feel her nose and fingertips tingling. Sometimes she could smell a fire burning in a faraway chimney. But she was always most awed by the silence. In New York, it was possible to appreciate a cold early morning seen through a frosty window. But no matter how tightly the window was closed, city sounds floated through. Cars honked, truck gears ground, garbage trucks ate noisy meals. A kid walked by carrying a blasting radio on his shoulder, and it seemed that somebody's car was always in the way of somebody else's. Deanie couldn't remember a morning when she hadn't heard an enraged shout of, "Move your car!" or "Get out of my place!" The shouts were usually followed by murderous threats. Much as Deanie appreciated the sights and silence of the country, she was most excited about the wildlife. In August, she and Faustine had spent hours exploring the farm. They had turned over rocks to find worms and grubs and hundred-leggers. They'd climbed trees to find caterpillars and lazy late summer butterflies. At dusk, they'd caught the last of the lightning bugs, but they'd always let them go before the evening was over. As fall caught up with summer and overtook it, they'd watched flocks of birds gather and head south in great gray bunches. Deanie especially liked the Canada geese. They flew through the sky in an even V formation, and the sight was rarely missed because they announced their arrival with noisy honking that was plainly heard in the chilly nighttime silence. "I do wish we had some bigger animals, though," Deanie told her twin one day. "I know," agreed Faustine. "Bugs and wild birds are nice, but a dog would be better. Even a fur fluff would be better." Fur fluff was the twins' private word for any small, furry pet, such as a hamster or gerbil. "I guess there's no reason to try asking Mom and Dad for a pet again." Deanie received an emphatic, "Brimbald not," from her blue-eyed, freckled-faced sister, and that was the end of that discussion. On the morning after the Halloween party, while Secret was still hidden in the little room upstairs, Mrs. Rosso announced, "We are going to have an old-fashioned Thanksgiving this year, a country Thanksgiving." The Rossos were gathered in the kitchen in various stages of breakfast. "What do you mean, Mom?" asked Candy, an eager look in her eyes. "I mean we're going to celebrate the holiday as it was meant to be celebrated. You might be surprised to know that Thanksgiving isn't just rushing to the Stop and Shop on the day before Thanksgiving and filling up your cart with stuffing mix, mashed potato flakes, cans of cranberry jelly and peas, a self-basting Mr. Tom turkey, and a carton of ice cream. There's more to it than that." Over the next few weeks, Deanie found out just what "more to it" meant. With her mother's help, and with her father's help on weekends, Deanie and her brothers and sisters baked pies and made jelly. They made their own apple butter and cranberry relish. While it was fun for everyone, Woody couldn't help saying, "I'm surprised Mom doesn't want a cow so we could milk it and make our own butter." One day the Rosso kids arrived home from school to find the kitchen table covered from end to end with squashes, gourds, and dried ears of corn. "Time to make the table and door decorations," their mother told them. But the most interesting thing, for 10 city kids, happened the day Mrs. Rosso made her announcement about an old-fashioned Thanksgiving. As soon as breakfast was over and everyone was dressed, the Rossos piled into their van, and Mr. Rosso started down the driveway, a mischievous look in his eyes. "Where are we going? Where are we going?" Jem kept pestering her parents, but they wouldn't answer. Deanie glanced at her twin. "Tosh," she whispered, "Grood," which meant a surprise, very exciting. Mr. Rosso turned right on the country highway at the end of their drive, and stayed on the road for a mile, and then turned left onto the drive of a neighboring farm. It was the Pritchard's place. Deanie had met Mr. and Mrs. Pritchard once with her mother. Mr. Pritchard and 2 farmhands ran a big turkey farm all by themselves. He and his wife looked as old as the hills to Deanie, but they seemed to work and bake and garden like anyone else. "The Pritchard's turkey farm?" asked Deanie as the van bumped its way slowly along the rutted gravel drive. "That's right," said Mr. Rosso. The Rosso kids were bursting with questions, but they held them in. A surprise was a surprise. Wrinkled Mr. Pritchard met the van with a shovel in his hand and a pipe in his mouth. "Right on time," he said gruffly. "I like that." With a wave of his hand, he indicated that the Rossos should follow him. So they did, Ira picking his way carefully through the muddy farmyard. As they rounded a back corner of the barn, they were greeted by an unceasing chorus of gobbling. "Grood," said Deanie under her breath. Before her was a huge pen crowded with turkeys. "Those are turkeys?" exclaimed Jan. "They don't look like turkeys at all." "Well, they are," said Mr. Rosso, "and one of them will be ours." Deanie's first thought was, "Why are Mom and Dad letting us get a pet?" Then she realized what her father meant. "For Thanksgiving?" she asked. "That's right," replied her mother. "This is a real treat. We can pick out any turkey we want, and Mr. Pritchard will tag it for us and then fatten it up for Thanksgiving. Our turkey this year will be fresh, not store-bought and frozen. It's up to you kids to decide on one." Deanie and her brothers and sisters rushed to the fence around the turkeys. Jan, Ira, and Hannah stood on the lowest rung, peering down. The others rested their arms on the top rung and gazed intently at the flock. "There's a fat one," called Bainbridge. "Where?" asked Ira. "There." "Look at that one," exclaimed Woody. "Oh, he's tough." "There are 12 of us," Abby pointed out. "We'd better choose the biggest one we see." It took a long time to agree on the biggest one, but at last Deanie pointed out a fat Tom strutting through the flock as if he were Turkey King. The Rossos agreed that no turkey was bigger than he. "We'll take him," Mr. Rosso told Mr. Pritchard. "And we'll name him Goliath," Deanie added. "That's not a good idea," muttered Mr. Pritchard, but nobody heard him. On Monday afternoon, Deanie persuaded the elementary school bus driver to make a stop a mile before the Rossos' farm. "What are we going to the Pritchards for?" Faustine asked her twin as they trudged up the pitted driveway. "To see Goliath, of course," replied Deanie. Goliath was as big and imperious as ever. "I think he's kind of handsome, don't you?" said Deanie as they leaned over the fence that surrounded the turkeys. "Kind of," replied Faustine. On Tuesday they were back again. "Look at him, he's so proud," said Deanie fondly. "He has nice manners," added Faustine. "It's crowded in that pen, but Goliath never steps on the other turkeys' feet." The twins visited Goliath whenever they could. It was the following week, not long after Woody had found a new home for Secret, that Deanie, resting her chin on the top rung of the turkey pen, said, "It's sad to think we're going to eat old Goliath for Thanksgiving dinner, isn't it?" "Rimbald Brondo," replied Faustine, extremely sad. "Maybe we should ask the others if we could choose a different turkey." "Maybe," said Faustine. But I don't really want to kill any of the turkeys. They're all Goliath's friends." "But we especially can't kill Goliath," said Faustine. "No, I don't think we can." Deanie looked into her sister's face, which was like looking into a mirror. "We better talk to Abby," she said, and Faustine agreed. That night, Abby listened patiently to the twins' pleas. "I know how you feel," she said, "but everyone chose Goliath. It's not easy for 12 people to agree on one thing. Besides, I don't think Mom and Dad would be very happy if they had to go back to Mr. Pritchard and explain we changed our minds, or why we changed our minds." "We won't eat Goliath," said Faustine stubbornly. Abby sighed. "Then don't eat him. You can eat stuffing and vegetables and cranberry sauce instead." "No, you don't understand," cried Deanie. "We won't let Goliath be killed. It's cruel. Come on, Faustine." The twins closed themselves in their bedroom. "We've got work to do," Deanie told her sister. "Plans to make." The other Rossos had no idea what the twins were up to until Saturday. That morning, the warm kitchen, which smelled of cloves and pumpkin and baking pie crust, was invaded by a 2-person picket line. Deanie marched around the table carrying a sign that read, "Save Goliath." She was followed by Faustine with a sign that showed a fat red X covering a picture of a cooked turkey. "What's all this?" asked Mr. Rosso, glancing at his wife. "We love Goliath," said Deanie. "And we don't want him killed for Thanksgiving," Faustine finished up. "But girls," said Mrs. Rosso, "we can't go back to Mr. Pritchard and tell him you fell in love with a turkey." The twins shrugged. "I don't see why not," said Deanie. Then she led the protest into the living room. Ira was the first one to crack. "I never thought about the killing part," he confessed with a shudder. "It is kind of mean," added Jan, looking up from a coloring book. That night, Abby knocked on the twins' bedroom door. "I've been thinking," she began. The following Monday afternoon, 3 school buses each stopped a mile down the road from the Rossos' farm. By the time the last one was disappearing in the distance, All 10 Rosso kids were gathered around the Pritchard's turkey pen, gazing at Goliath. "So we'll just choose another turkey," said Party practically. "Maybe Mr. Pritchard will let us trade. Look over there. That turkey in the corner is almost as fat as Goliath." "But we'd still have to kill it," said Ira in a trembling voice. "We don't have to, stupid," said Woody. "Old Mr. Pritchard does that." "I don't want any of the turkeys to be killed," Jan broke in. "It's mean." "We don't want them to be killed either," said Deanie, speaking for Faustine as well. "Neither do I," said Abby and Candy at the same time. "I guess I don't either," said Bainbridge. "Thanksgiving wouldn't be Thanksgiving without a turkey," said Hardy slowly. "But why do we have to know the turkey we eat ahead of time?" "Right," said Bainbridge. "I think that's the problem." The twins glanced at each other, satisfied. "I could eat a turkey from the freezer of Stop and Shop, I think," said Deanie. "I'd know it was a turkey and someone had to kill it, but we wouldn't have known the bird ahead of time. Besides, turkeys in freezers don't even look like turkeys. They look like frosted plastic bags." "Is it agreed then?" said Abby. "We'll tell Mr. Pritchard we've changed our minds and won't be needing Goliath after all." "Agreed," said Deanie joyously. The Rossos found Mr. Pritchard and one of his farmhands repairing the fencing around a pigsty. "Well, well," said Mr. Pritchard, glancing up and seeing the 10 kids coming toward him. He squinted fiercely into the sun. "Checking on that bird of yours again?" Abby stepped forward. "Yes, sir," she replied. "And we have something to tell you." "What's that?" Mr. Pritchard was still squatting on the ground. He slid his hat back, scratched his head, and stood up. "Well, sir, we won't be needing him after all." "You won't, eh? And why is that?" "Well, our plans have changed. We hope you won't mind too much." Mr. Pritchard frowned and rubbed the white stubble on his chin. "I guess not," he said. "I'm sure someone else will want the bird. I don't think I'll have any trouble selling him again." Horror washed over Deanie. They weren't saving Goliath after all. She squeezed between Hannah and Faustine and pushed her way forward until she was next to Abby. "Wait a sec," she exclaimed. We'll take him after all. But we'll take him alive." "It was the only thing I could think of," Deanie told her brothers and sisters desperately as they were walking home later. "I know we can't save all the turkeys, but at least we can save Goliath." "But Deanie, Mom's going to be doubly mad," Abby pointed out. "She'll have to buy a store turkey and she'll be stuck with a live turkey when she's told us hundreds of times no pets." "We'll just have to convince her to let us keep him," Deanie persisted. "We'll wait until he arrives. She won't be able to say no. It'll almost be Thanksgiving then. She'll have to show some holiday spirit." Somehow everybody forgot to tell Mr. and Mrs. Rosso that they would need to add a frozen turkey to their shopping list. Then, early in the morning on the day before Thanksgiving, the Pritchard turkey farm truck drove up to the Rossos' driveway, and one of the farmhands jumped out of the cab. He hurried around to the back of the truck, lifted a crate off, and deposited it by the Rossos' stoop. Mrs. Rosso stuck her head out of the door in surprise. "But that's a live turkey!" she exclaimed. "The children said you'd changed your mind, ma'am," replied the farmhand. He touched his hat, then climbed into the cab, backed the truck around noisily, and headed down the drive. Mrs. Rosso turned to find Deanie and Faustine watching her sheepishly. "Do you know anything about this?" she asked, closing the door behind her with a blast of chilly air. She sounded more confused than angry. Deanie grasped Faustine's hand. "Borderish," she muttered helplessly. "Don't you think we should let that turkey out?" asked Faustine carefully, taking a step toward the door. "We can't just—" "Not until I find out what that man meant when he said, 'The children said you changed your mind,'" replied Mrs. Rosso. Into the kitchen. While Faustine helped her mother with the table-setting system, Deanie slumped in a chair and told Mrs. Rosso the entire story of Goliath. Mr. Rosso came into the kitchen in time to hear the end of the story, threw on his hat, coat, scarf, and gloves, and flew out the door in search of a frozen turkey. Mrs. Rosso tried to remain calm and patient, but she was having difficulty. "I know how you feel about animals, Gardenia," she said, "but you should have told me what was going on. You are not the only one eating Thanksgiving dinner. Getting a fresh turkey was my idea. I should have had some say in the matter." Deanie hung her head. "I know," she replied. "It wasn't just your fault, though," Mrs. Rosso went on. "All of you kept quiet. Abby and Bainbridge should have known better." "We all wanted to tell you, Mom," said Deanie. "I guess we were just afraid for Goliath." Mrs. Rosso patted Deanie's knee. "Well, your hearts were in the right place," she said. Now let's just hope your father finds something big enough for the 12 of us." While they waited for Mr. Rosso to return, Mrs. Rosso gathered all the children and told them exactly what she thought about what they had done. She gave Abby and Bainbridge an extra talking to because they were the oldest. It wasn't really fair, but that's what happened. The oldest were supposed to know better. Mr. Rosso came home empty-handed. "Sorry," he told his family. "I drove to 5 supermarkets. There's not a turkey to be had. Everyone's already bought theirs." "Not a single turkey?" repeated Woody pitifully. "Well, actually I did find one, but it was about the size of a baseball. While I was trying to decide whether there was any point in taking it, somebody else bought it." "Then I guess we'll have a vegetarian dinner this year." Mrs. Rosso looked around the kitchen at the vegetables and cornbread and muffins and pies. "There's certainly plenty to eat without Goliath." "Goliath!" exclaimed Deanie, remembering. "He's still out there in that crate." "Hey," said Woody, "maybe Mr. Pritchard could come over and, I bet there's still time." "No." 9 pairs of angry eyes bored into him. Okay, said Woody. "Bainbridge, why don't you and Deanie go outside and fix Goliath up somewhere?" suggested Mr. Rosso. "Does that mean we get to keep him?" cried Deanie. "Absolutely not," replied her mother. "But there's nothing we can do about him until after tomorrow, so we might as well make him comfortable somewhere. I suppose you know everything about keeping a turkey, what he eats, how much space he needs." "Not exactly," replied Deanie. "Then call Mr. Pritchard and find out, honey. He's your responsibility." So once again the Rossos had a temporary pet. But first thing Friday morning, Mrs. Rosso announced, "Time to find a proper home for Goliath. Since all you kids saved his neck, you may all participate in the search. But Deanie, I'm appointing you head of the Find a Home for Goliath committee." Most of the rest of Deanie's Thanksgiving vacation was spent poring through the ads in the local papers with her brothers and sisters and making phone calls. Every call led to a dead end until Abby, momentarily distracted by a page of department store ads, saw the announcement that read, "Hillsborough Mall, 100 stores, restaurants, movies, exhibits, and now, bring the kids to our new petting zoo." "See, a petting zoo," said Abby after she'd read the ad to the others. "Maybe they'd like a nice tom turkey." "A nice, polite tom turkey," added Faustine. "Well, we'll find out," replied Deanie. After several phone calls, she reached the woman in charge of the petting zoo, who was delighted with the donation of Goliath and even sent someone out to the Rossos' farm to pick him up. "Come visit him any time you want," called the man before he drove off. "We will," called Deanie back. And she did, many times. But a pet at the petting zoo was not at all the same as a pet of her own at home. Chapter 6. Janthina. "I love Christmas, I love snow," Janthina Rosso hummed busily. She tried hard to remember the song Mr. Hepler, her first-grade teacher, had sung the other day. Jan was filling in a worksheet for school. It was all about Christmas, but that didn't fool her. A worksheet was work, whether it showed the alphabet or pictures of Santa Claus. And this worksheet was homework, no fair. Jan was sure Ira had never had homework when he was in first grade. Jan paused and sucked on the end of her green crayon. She hoped the crayon would make a spot on her front tooth. Then she could walk around smiling, and all day people would say, "Jan, you've got a piece of spinach on your tooth," and Jan could laugh and show them it was just crayon. Jan looked at her worksheet again. She had finished 2 rows. The 3rd row showed a picture of a bell with an X over it. Next to the bell were a candle, a wreath, and a bow. Jan knew she was supposed to make an X over the bow, since it was the other B word, and color in the candle and the wreath. She looked down the page. 4 more rows. This worksheet would take forever. Maybe one of her brothers or sisters would finish it for her. They usually did anything she asked. Jan wandered into the kitchen, which was warm and smelled of gingerbread. Hannah was the only one there, busy doing her homework. You never knew what to expect when you asked Hannah a question, but Jan decided to try anyway. "Hannah, will you finish my worksheet for me?" "Ahem!" Jan spun around. Her mother was standing in the doorway. "Janthina, it is Friday afternoon, and you have plenty of time to do your homework. Besides, your homework is for you to do, not anyone else. Why don't you finish it right now? We have lots of Christmas things to do this weekend." "We do?" "Yes, we're going to get our tree, remember?" "Oh, yes." Christmas, Christmas, Christmas. It was Jan's favorite time of year. And here in the country, Christmas somehow seemed more special than in New York City. Jan had to admit it wasn't quite as exciting. No glittering store windows everywhere you turned, no Santa Clauses on every corner, but it was more fun. One day, shortly after the man from the petting zoo had come for Goliath, Mrs. Rosso had given a country Christmas speech that wasn't too different from her country Thanksgiving speech, and Jan had paid close attention. "We are going to become do-it-yourselfers," Mrs. Rosso had said. "We are going to make our own decorations and some of our own presents. We're going to chop down our own Christmas tree and make wreaths from holly and laurel and evergreens and do our baking from scratch." "Can we still use the electricity?" asked Woody. Mrs. Rosso laughed. "Of course we can. And we'll put up the store-bought decorations we already have. And we'll have to buy most of the materials and ingredients we need. I just want you kids to see that Christmas isn't all department stores and electronic toys and things that come out of boxes and grocery bags." "Anyone who wants to use my tools is welcome," added Mr. Rosso. "I'll be glad to give you a hand if you want to make gifts or decorations in the workshop. There's just one thing. I'm going to be working on a secret project. Let's call it Project X in the basement. I'll keep it away from the workshop when I'm not busy with it. I'll cover it with a sheet. And I expect you not to peek. Is that clear?" Mr. Rosso tried to sound stern, but Jan could see that his eyes were dancing and his mouth was twitching. "It's clear," said Jan, and everyone laughed, since Jan had such a terrible time keeping secrets, hers or anyone else's. "Who's Project X for?" she wanted to know. "My lips are sealed," said Mr. Rosso, "so no peeking. And if you see a sign on the basement door that says Project X, don't come downstairs. That means I'm working on it." "It's probably another wall unit," Jan heard Woody whisper to Hardy. From that day on, there were many workshops throughout the farmhouse. The kitchen table was almost always covered with cookie decorations and cookie cutters and spices and flour. A table was set up in the den for card making. A table in the family room became the ornament making center. And a table in the messy mudroom was where Mrs. Rosso worked on her evergreen wreaths. Jan sighed and sat down next to Hannah to finish her worksheet. The next afternoon, after a lunch of hot soup, the 12 Rossos put on their outdoor clothes. "It's only 28 degrees today," said Ira, glancing at the thermometer. "Hats for everyone, then," Mrs. Rosso announced. When the kids were bundled up to her satisfaction, the Rossos set out across the farmyard. Mr. Rosso stopped in the shed for an axe, a saw, and Jen and Ira's sled, and then they trudged through the woods. A dusting of snow, not even enough to cover the oak leaves on the ground, had fallen the night before. It didn't crunch underfoot or smush into snowballs, but it was a nice snow, Jan thought. It made the woods look Christmassy. "Whose woods these are?" said Candy, quoting a Robert Frost poem as they walked along. "I think I know. His house is in the village, though." "Let's sing Christmas songs," suggested Jan, watching her foggy breath puff away in front of her. "Great," said Hannah. "Here's a good one. We 3 kings of Orient are smoking on a rubber cigar. It was loaded and exploded." "Hannah," said Mr. Rosso warningly, as Woody and Hardy dissolved into laughter. "Daddy, I don't know that one," Jan complained, and couldn't understand why her sisters and brothers, except Ira, laughed at that too. "Never mind, Jan," Ira whispered. "Bainbridge, will you pull me on the sled?" Jan asked pitifully. "Sure," he replied, helping her on. "You kids are supposed to be looking for a tree," Mrs. Rosso reminded them. "Looking for a tree?" exclaimed Hannah. "We're surrounded." "You know what I mean." "There are lots of fir trees farther ahead," said Faustine. The twins had spent more time in the woods than anyone else had. Sure enough, the Rossos soon came to a small grove of evergreens. "Wow," cried Abby. "Look at this tree. It's perfect." "No, look at this one," said Hardy. "Here's a big one," said Bainbridge. "Not too tall," Mr. Rosso cautioned. "It has to fit in the living room." It was Jan who finally found a tree that everyone agreed on. It was neither too tall nor too squat, too skinny nor too wide, and the needles were the perfect length for showing off ornaments. Bainbridge whacked at the trunk with an axe. "Oh, I hear it crying!" exclaimed Deanie. "You do not," said Jan, but she felt a little sorry for the tree too. What could she do, though? You had to have a tree for Santa to leave presents under. When Bainbridge had made a notch in the tree, the others took turns sawing through the trunk. The tree began to wobble and lean, and at last, "Timber!" cried Hannah, but her father caught the tree before it hit the ground. Mr. Rosso laid it on the shed. "Only the tree gets a ride back," he told Jan. "You can walk alongside and hold it in place if you want." "Since it's my tree, I better." "It is not your tree. You just—" Hannah began. But Mrs. Rosso put a stop to the argument. "We'll make hot chocolate when we get home," she announced. Everyone picked up the pace. When they reached the farmhouse, Mrs. Rosso and Jan, Ira, Hannah, and the twins started the hot chocolate, while the other kids helped Mr. Rosso stand the tree in a bucket of water on the back stoop and spray its branches with wilt-proof. "Why is my tree outside, Mommy?" asked Jan. "We have to leave it there until it's a little closer to Christmas. If we bring it inside now, it'll dry out and the needles will fall off." "Ew," replied Jan. But she gazed proudly at her tree, and every morning and every night until the Rossos brought it inside, she stepped onto the stoop to see that it was all right. Jan was counting the days to Christmas, and there weren't too many left. Just 11. Not bad considering she'd started with 58. Jan wasn't sure what that meant, but she did know that the farmhouse was full of secrets. Her father was working away at Project X in the basement. Jan often heard hammering and tapping and sawing and the rasping sound of the plane as it smoothed rough edges. Everywhere she went, someone cried, "Don't look," or "Close your eyes," or "Don't come in." There were closets labeled "Do not enter" and "No peeking." Jan had secrets of her own. Some were homemade, as her mother wanted, and some were store-bought. She was very proud that she had presents or ideas for presents for every member of her family. 11 presents were a lot, and she had made very special Christmas cards for her grandparents and Mr. Hepler. Jan's best homemade present was for her mother. She had found some stencils and painted fruit designs onto jar lids to make beautiful coasters for when company came. Her best store-bought present was for Abby. Abby liked jewelry, so Jan had bought her a pair of earrings with long blue feathers on them. They were gorgeous, and they had cost almost $2. Jan had wrapped them and put them under her bed with her other presents. Jan noticed that year that the closer Christmas came, the harder it was to sleep. She never knew when Santa Claus might be out making a trial run. It would be so exciting to see him. One night Jan awoke with a start. She thought she had heard something. Sleigh bells jingling? Rudolph pawing at the eaves? Jan leapt out of bed. She ran to the window. She saw only the moon shining on another feeble dusting of snow, and heard only rap, rap, rap. It was her father in his workshop. Jan knew she wouldn't be able to fall asleep until the house was silent. She tiptoed into the hall. Since she couldn't tell time, she had no idea how late it was. The doors to the bedrooms of her brothers and sisters were closed, although a light was on in the big girl's room. But the door to her parents' room was open, and their bed was still made. Jan crept downstairs. The hammering grew louder. She reached the door to the basement and saw the Project X sign. Well, that was that. She couldn't go any further. She knew better than to intrude on Project X. As Jan stood there, the hammering stopped, and she heard voices. Her mother was in the basement, too. Jan couldn't help listening for a few moments. She'd been so good about not getting in closets or lifting the Project X sheet. "Kids," she heard her mother say, and then something about Christmas. Her father's voice was louder. "Never guess it's a doghouse." Jan's heart began to pound as loudly as her father's hammer. A doghouse! If her father was building a doghouse, it could only mean one thing. Mrs. Rosso had changed her mind about a pet, and Jan and her brothers and sisters were being given a dog, probably a puppy, for Christmas. That truly was a surprise. It would be the best surprise of their lives. No wonder Jan's father had made such a big deal about Project X. Jan ran back up the stairs and down the hall and jumped into her bed. She wished Ira or Hannah were awake because she was bursting with her news. Then she remembered that Project X was a secret and that she shouldn't tell what she had found out. With great difficulty, Jan managed to fall asleep again, and she dreamed about puppies all night. The next morning, Jan kept the amazing secret while she got ready for school. She kept it during breakfast. She kept it while Mrs. Rosso shooed the 10 children out the door in alphabetical order. But the secret didn't last much longer. By the time Jan reached the bus stop, she truly thought she was going to explode. She wiggled around like a puppy and hopped from one foot to the other. "Guys," Jan said, addressing all of her brothers and sisters. No one was paying attention. Guys, I found out what Project X is." Woody and Hardy stopped punching each other. Hannah stopped teasing the twins. "I have to tell you," exclaimed Jan. "I just have to. It is so good. I accidentally heard Mommy and Daddy talking last night, and Project X is a doghouse." "A doghouse? Are you sure?" cried Hannah. "It is shaped like a doghouse," said Hardy slowly, thinking of the sheet-covered form he'd seen in the basement. "I'm very sure," said Jan. "So that means we're probably getting a puppy for Christmas." The Rosso kids looked at each other excitedly. "I wonder what made Mom change her mind," mused Abby. "Who cares? Don't knock it," said Woody. "Maybe Dad made her change her mind. He's never said 10 kids is enough. We can't let Mom and Dad know we know about Project X, though, Bainbridge reminded the others. Okay, that's our secret. Okay, agreed his brothers and sisters. Oh, let's buy the puppy some presents, said Candy. We could get it a leash and a collar and a food dish. Then we'll be ready for it. Our puppy should have some presents on Christmas, too. The Rosso kids were very busy the next few days. When Mrs. Rosso drove into town, Bainbridge and Candy went with her. They had collected money from all of the kids, and they secretly bought some puppy supplies. Abby began knitting a blanket for the puppy. Jan and Ira wrapped the puppy's presents. The presents would have to stay hidden, though, until after the puppy had made his appearance. We better choose a name for our puppy, Jan told Ira and Hannah as they were getting ready for bed one chilly night. Right, said Hannah. Let's talk to the others. The kids met in the twins' room. We need a boy's name and a girl's name, said Jan. But we are not going to look in what shall we name the baby, said Abby. I'll never forget when Mom found out she was going to have twins, and she opened that awful book and saw that the girls' names would be Faustine and Gardenia. What were the boys' names? Asked Deanie curiously. Farley and Galen. Abby made a gagging sound. You mean I could have been named Farley? Shrieked Faustine. It's not as bad as Dagwood, said Woody. Well, anyway, said Abby, we'll decide on nice normal names for the puppy, and we won't even think about name the baby. I like Sally, said Jan. Mary, said Abby. Tom, said Ira. John, said Woody. A puppy named John? Asked Bainbridge. The Rossos decided to name the puppy after they had seen it. Christmas Eve that year was a crystal clear, starry night. No snow for Christmas, said Ira, sounding disappointed. But this is better, said Jan. Santa won't get lost. He and Rudolph will be able to see where they're going. And I'll be able to see them, she thought. Abby and Bainbridge hid smiles. It had been a long time since they'd believed in Santa. Jan was sure she wouldn't be able to sleep at all on Christmas Eve. The day had already been exciting, and so many more exciting things would happen while she was in bed. The tree had been trimmed several days earlier, but on Christmas Eve Mr. Rosso had turned on its lights for the first time. Jan had looked at her little tree standing in the corner of the living room in a haze of soft, glowing color, and thought she'd never seen anything so beautiful. Then Jan and the rest of the kids had brought all of their presents out of their secret hiding places and arranged them under the tree. They'd sung Christmas carols and had eggnog. Jan had spit hers out. And then Jan had set out a plate of cookies for Santa Claus. Finally, Mrs. Rosso had said, "Time for bed, kids," and Jan hadn't objected. Santa would come only after she'd gone to sleep. Then he'd slide down the chimney and fill the 12 stockings and pile more presents under the tree. Before he left, he'd stop to eat Jan's snack. Oh, it was so exciting. How could Jan possibly fall asleep? But she did. And when she awoke in the gray dawn of Christmas, she realized she'd slept very soundly. She didn't remember hearing sleigh bells or hooves pawing the roof or a jolly voice calling out, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." But who cared? It was Christmas. "Merry Christmas!" cried Jan. "Merry Christmas!" Hannah and Ira were up in a flash. "Come on," said Hannah. The 3 youngest Rosso children ran through the second-floor hallway, knocking on bedroom doors. "It's Christmas!" they shouted. Everyone woke up quickly, even Abby, who had said she was too old to get excited about Christmas anymore. But Mr. Rosso wouldn't allow anyone downstairs until he'd lit their Christmas morning fire and made a pot of coffee. After what seemed like days to Jan, her father called, "Okay, everybody." The kids were lined up on the steps in reverse alphabetical order, Jan first, Abby last. They ran downstairs. Jan was greeted by stuffed stockings and mounds of gifts. She was glad there were 12 people in her family because she liked the sight of lots and lots of presents. For the next couple of hours, Jan and her brothers and sisters untied ribbons and ripped through wrapping paper. Jan got her very own microphone so she could pretend she was singing on a stage, a sweater knitted by Mrs. Rosso, a doctor's kit in uniform, and a jigsaw puzzle made specially by Hardy. The living room of the Rossos' house was filled with oohs and ahs, but when the last gift had been opened, no doghouse or puppy was in sight. "What do you know?" Mr. Rosso said suddenly to Mrs. Rosso. "I believe there's one more gift. We forgot something." Jan watched her father disappear into the basement. A few minutes later, he returned with Project X in his arms. It was still covered with the sheet. He set it in front of Jan. "This is for you, sweetie," he said. "Merry Christmas." "For me?" Jan couldn't believe it. The puppy was going to be hers. She wondered where it was hidden. Jan pulled the sheet up carefully. Underneath was a spectacular dollhouse. A dollhouse? Exclaimed Jan. What had happened? She had misunderstood something. A moment of stunned silence followed. Abby broke it. Oh, Dad, it's beautiful, she cried. Isn't it, Jan? Yes, beautiful, Jan managed to say. And it was. It was the dollhouse of Jan's dreams. It's just that it wasn't a doghouse. But Jan tried to look thrilled anyway. Christmas Day was so full of new toys and phone calls and visitors that Jan and her brothers and sisters were able to cover up their disappointment easily. That night they put the puppies' Christmas presents in the attic. Christmas was over and Jan had a dollhouse, but the Rossos were still without a pet. Chapter 7. Eberhard. Eberhard Rosso's heart was racing. A blizzard! Had he heard right? The weather forecaster had just predicted a blizzard. It was a Tuesday in January, 3 weeks after Christmas, and Hardy and his brothers had come home from school. We've hardly had any snow since we moved here, Hardy remarked. Just little dustings. Look outside. Not a flake in sight. Woody shrugged. He reached across Hardy to change the station on the radio. Hey, leave it alone, cried Hardy. I want to hear the next weather report. You can hear it later. If there's going to be a blizzard, we'll know about it. But this station is really boring. Don't touch it. Don't touch me. Hey, you guys, said Bainbridge. Be quiet. I have to start my homework. Woody shot both of his brothers a murderous look, then raised his hand to karate chop the radio. Bainbridge caught his hand on its way down. If you break that, little brother, I'll break— Shh, hissed Hardy. Listen. Winter storm warnings are in effect, the newscaster on the radio was saying. We might see as much as 2 feet of snow, and high winds will cause drifting of up to 5 feet. We're really going to get it this time, folks, he added. Please stay tuned for further details. Hardy stared at his brothers in awe. Whoa, was all he could say. But the next morning didn't seem very promising, blizzard-wise. Will you look at that, said Hardy in disgust, peering out of the boys' bedroom window at the thermometer on the side of the house. 43 degrees. How's it supposed to snow at that temperature? And look at the sky. It's gray, all right, but I've seen worse. I know what's going to happen. They're going to get us all psyched up for a blizzard, and then we'll have about 2 inches of snow, maybe less, and then they won't even have to close school. Would you chill out, said Bainbridge. Finish getting dressed. We're going to be late for breakfast. I want to hear the weather again first, Hardy replied, reaching for the radio. But before he could turn it on, a shriek came from Abby and Candy's room. What is it? What's wrong? Woody, Hardy, and Bainbridge dashed into their sister's room. A blizzard! We're going to get a blizzard, cried Candy. Isn't that romantic? You mean they're still predicting the blizzard? Asked Hardy. Excitement shot through him. What did they say? They said the temperature's supposed to drop all day, accompanied by thickening clouds and rising winds, Candy replied. What'd you do? Interrupted Woody. Memorize the report? Ignore him, Candy, said Abby. Go on. Snow is supposed to start falling by midnight tonight and go on for who knows how long. All right, whooped Hardy. All right. Sure enough, the temperature did drop that day. It was well into the 20s by the time Hardy and the other elementary school kids got off their bus and started up the drive to the Rossos' farmhouse. It's going to snow for sure, said Faustine, sniffing the air. I can smell it. And I can feel it, added Deanie, rubbing her wrist. Deanie had once broken her wrist badly, and now it let her know with a dull ache whenever rain or snow was on the way. Wind's picking up too, said Hardy, looking at the lashing treetops. Poor birds, said Faustine. I always feel sorry for the birds and wild animals when it snows. They have such a hard time finding food. Yeah, agreed Hannah. And they have to sleep in the snow, Jan pointed out. Yuck. A gust of wind blew a dirty paper cup against Ira's foot. Litterbugs, he muttered. He picked up the cup gingerly and held it away from him as he and the others hurried toward the house, heads bent into the wind. Mrs. Rosso greeted them with hugs and hot chocolate. Snow's on the way, she said. We'll have to batten down the hatches tonight. What do you mean? Asked Hardy. Make sure everything in the yard is put away or tied down. It wouldn't hurt to close the shutters on the house either. Apparently we're in for a doozy. I'm going to drive into town now and buy some candles and canned food just in case. Anyone want to come with me? I do, cried the younger children. But Hardy decided to stay at home where he could keep an eye on the storm. Not much happened that afternoon, though, except that the wind began to howl around the corners of the farmhouse, and night seemed to fall quickly as the sky grew darker and heavier with clouds. Mrs. Rosso and Jan, Ira, and Hannah returned with bags of supplies, and Mr. Rosso came home from work somewhat earlier than usual. It's as dark as a pocket out there, he said, and as cold as a witch's nose. That night, Mrs. Rosso fixed chickens for dinner. If she planned things just right, the 12 Rossos could eat exactly 2 whole large chickens at a meal. Afterward, Hardy trailed through the house, following his father, who was closing the shutters and checking nooks and crannies for cracks that might let the snow in. "Better start your homework, son," said Mr. Rosso absently. Hardy was much too excited to settle down with his homework. Besides, he was sure he didn't need to do it. "Aw, Dad, we won't have school tomorrow." "You never know. Better get to it." Hardy did a patchwork job on his math, jumping up every few minutes to look out the window. By the time he went to bed at 10 o'clock, not a flake of snow had fallen, but the wind was so fierce that it rattled the shutters and whistled down the chimney in the living room. Like Jan on Christmas Eve, Hardy was sure he wouldn't be able to fall asleep, but he did almost immediately, and when he awoke, it was the next morning, 5 minutes before the boy's alarm clock was set to go off. Hardy rolled out of bed, his feet hitting the floor with a thud, and made a grab for the window shade. It snapped up, and Hardy carefully opened the window and the shutters. He was nearly blinded, not by the glare of sunlight, but by a world turned white. "It's the blizzard!" Hardy shouted. "It's here!" Mumbled Bainbridge and Woody from their beds. "It's the blizzard!" Hardy was in awe of what he saw outside the window. The farmyard was blanketed with a thick covering of snow, and more was falling, although to Hardy the snow looked less as if it were falling than if it were being hurled from the clouds in angry handfuls. He had never seen anything like it. The snow came teeming and whirling down, and while a regular old snowfall is quiet, this storm was noisy. The wind continued to roar and howl as it lashed the snow to the ground. "Oh boy," murmured Hardy, closing the window. "No school today, that's for sure." But he knew he had to check, so he turned on the radio softly and tuned it to the local station. "Everything closed up tight as a drum here in Mercer County," the announcer was saying. "All schools are closed. I repeat, all public, private, and parochial schools in Mercer County are closed today." Hardy let out a whoop, turned off the alarm clock, and, leaving his sleeping brothers behind, ran downstairs and into the kitchen. He found his parents, Candy, and the younger children already there. "Snow day! Snow day!" cried Hardy. The morning was spent doing just what Hardy liked best on an unexpected vacation from school. With the snow whirling and blowing and drifting outside, he and his brothers and sisters crowded onto the couches in the family room with blankets and watched reruns of I Love Lucy and Leave It to Beaver and Gilligan's Island. Later in the morning, they watched game shows, Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and Concentration. Mr. Rosso, who hadn't even been able to get the back door open after breakfast, happily spent the morning in his workshop, while Mrs. Rosso organized 2 closets and put the contents of a photo album into chronological order. Late in the afternoon, Hardy, Woody, and the twins bundled up in outdoor clothes. After Deanie squeezed through the tiny opening they were able to create by heaving against the back door, they shoveled off the stoop and decided on a walk to the barn, just to see what it was like during a storm. But the wind blew the snow against their faces in stinging gusts, and they couldn't see for more than a few inches. Disappointed, they returned to the house. Not much later, the announcement came over the radio that school would be closed the next day as well. A 4-day weekend! Hardy was beside himself with pleasure. That night, the electricity went off. "I'm glad of the candles we bought," said Mrs. Rosso, "but I'm afraid we're going to freeze to death." Bainbridge and Abby built a fire in the living room fireplace, and the Rossos gathered around it with blankets. They toasted popcorn in the candle-lit room. When the popcorn was gone, a hush fell over them. Hardy listened to the wind whistling and the fire crackling and Ira breathing next to him. Then he heard something else. "What was that?" asked Faustine. "I don't know, but I heard it too," Hardy told her. "You guys are," Bainbridge started to say, when a crash sounded outside that no one could miss. "I better go check," said Mr. Rosso, getting to his feet. "I'll go with you," said Mrs. Rosso. None of the kids wanted to be left behind. They followed their parents in a nervous bunch. Mr. Rosso took the biggest flashlight he could find and shined it out the back door. "Garbage cans knocked over!" exclaimed Hardy. The garbage cans had been moved against the side of the house the afternoon before. Now one was tipped over part way, the lid off, garbage spilling into the snow. "Maybe an escaped prisoner is on the loose," cried Hannah. "Maybe he's trying to get into our house." "Mommy, really?" whimpered Jan. "Of course not, honey. Hannah, don't say things like that, please." The rest of the evening was quiet, and by bedtime the power had been restored, but Hardy couldn't stop thinking about the garbage can. Who or what had turned it over? Hardy had a real mystery to solve, just like Frank and Joe Hardy. The next morning he got to work right after breakfast. He put on his outdoor clothes, replacing his wool hat with his Sherlock Holmes hat. Then he slipped a magnifying glass into his pocket and squeezed out the back door. His mother handed him a shovel. "See if you can dig us out while you look for clues," she said. "Oh, Mom, it's still snowing," Hardy replied, but he began work on a path from the back door to the drive. The snow was still falling, but not as heavily, and the wind had died down. Hardy figured that at least 1.5 feet of snow was on the ground. He saw a few drifts that were as tall as he was. As he shoveled, he looked for clues. But of course any clues from the night before, footprints or lost buttons or bits of clothing, were long covered by snow. When Hardy finished the path, he examined the trash cans in the side of the house with his magnifying glass, but he didn't see anything except big-looking garbage. That night the Rossos, who were beginning to have what Mrs. Rosso called cabin fever, played board games by the fireplace. Jan and Ira were playing checkers, and Jan was just shouting, "King me," when Hardy heard a noise again. "Shh," he said, sitting up straight. "I heard something." The room grew silent. Clink, clank, clink. This time the sounds came from the front of the house. Everyone ran to the front door, and Mr. Rosso thrust it open while Mrs. Rosso turned on the porch lights. The yard was empty. "The chain on the bird feeder is swaying," Hannah pointed out. "It must be getting windy again," said Hardy. "I wonder why we didn't hear the chain before," mused Abby. No one knew. When Hardy woke up on Saturday morning, he discovered that the snow had stopped falling. "Now I can do some real detective work," he thought. He put on his plaid hat and found his magnifying glass. Then he tiptoed out of the house. He didn't want to get stuck with any more shoveling. He bet Frank and Joe Hardy's father never made them shovel snow while they were working on a case. Hardy looked at the garbage cans again. He dug through the snow around them. He found some crumbs and toast crust and orange peels, but no buttons or matchbooks or shreds of clothing. He walked across the yard. Not a human footprint anywhere, just some slender tracks. The tracks circled the house. Hardy followed them. When he reached the back again, he nearly whooped with joy, until he realized the human footprints he had just found were his own. "Darn," said Hardy. He investigated the bird feeder. Seed was everywhere. "Messy birds," he said. "Unless—" An idea began to form in Hardy's mind. He took another look at the garbage cans. Then he followed his footprints to the bird feeder, keeping an eye on the smaller tracks beside him. He muttered. The skinny tracks circled the posts that supported the feeder. Then they angled off across the farmyard and into the woods. "Oh no," Hardy said softly. Then, "Oh no!" He ran through the deep snow as fast as he was able, which wasn't very fast, and burst through the back door of the house and into the kitchen. "Mom!" he shouted. "Dad! Everybody!" Most of the Rossos were in the kitchen, pouring glasses of orange juice and filling cereal bowls. "Hardy!" Mrs. Rosso said sharply. "What's the matter? And why are you wearing your boots in the kitchen? You're dripping everywhere. Go back in the mudroom and take them off, please." "But I solved the mystery!" Hardy cried. "And we're all in trouble. Dad, call the police." "Boots," said Mrs. Rosso, pointing to Hardy's feet. "Mom, we're in trouble." "Boots." "Why are we in trouble?" asked Faustine nervously. She glanced at Deanie and murmured, "Meso smash." Deanie looked back at her twin with frightened eyes. "Hannah was right," said Hardy, standing his ground. "There is an escaped convict, and he's been hanging around our house. Now he's off in the woods somewhere." "How do you know there's an escaped convict?" asked Mr. Rosso. "Have you been listening to the radio?" "No," replied Hardy, "but all the clues are right in our yard. The only garbage outside the cans is food. The guy is hungry. He didn't find much in the cans, though, so he walked around the house looking for other stuff. On the way, he crashed into the bird feeder and ate some seed. That's what we heard last night. Then he must have gotten nervous, so he ran into the woods." "Are you saying there are footprints in our yard?" asked Mrs. Rosso, who now seemed truly concerned and apparently had forgotten about Hardy's wet boots. "Well, there are prints," Hardy replied, "but not footprints. They're stilt prints. See, the convict is very clever, and he knows the police could trace him by his footprints, so he's walking on a pair of stilts. They left skinny holes all around the yard." Bainbridge let out a guffaw, and Woody spit out a mouthful of milk, spraying it across the table at Faustine. "Ew, ew!" Faustine cried, grabbing for a napkin. "This convict was walking on stilts through the snow?" Bainbridge snorted with laughter. "Boots," Mrs. Rosso ordered Hardy. "Aren't you going to call the police, Dad?" Hardy wanted to know. "I don't think so." "But that guy's probably right out there in the woods." "Yeah, polishing his stilts," said Woody with a grin. "Boy," said Hardy, "I do all this work and everyone laughs at me." He stomped into the mudroom. Hardy stayed mad at the Rossos all day. Just to prove how stupid they were, he wore his plaid hat all day too. It would remind them that he was a detective. It was late in the afternoon, as dusk was falling, that Hardy found the real solution to the mystery. Clink, clank, clink went the chain on the feeder again. Hardy rushed to the window by the front door. Then he rushed around the house, rounding up his family. "Hey, you guys! Hey, everybody!" he exclaimed softly. "Come look out the window!" The Rossos crowded around the front windows. Standing at the feeder, his neck arched gracefully to reach the food inside, was a fawn. "A deer baby," said Jan. "Right?" "Well, an old deer baby," Mr. Rosso replied. "He's already losing his spots, and you can see where his antlers are going to grow." "He must be an orphan," said Faustine, "and he's having trouble finding food because of all the snow on the ground. Oh, Mom, can we adopt him?" "No, we cannot," replied Mrs. Rosso. "No pets. Besides, honey, he's wild. He doesn't want to be adopted." "Flag was adopted in the yearling." "But in the end that didn't work out," said Mrs. Rosso. "Remember?" Faustine nodded. But she and Hardy and the other kids wanted to adopt the fawn anyway. On Sunday, Mrs. Rosso agreed that they could put food out for it. Hardy, the twins, Jan, Ira, and Hannah tried to lure the fawn out of the woods, but he would only approach the food if no one was around. "He can smell us, you know," Hardy told his brothers and sisters. School opened again on Monday. The fawn ate in the morning while the Rosso kids were gone. He did the same thing on Tuesday and Wednesday. By Wednesday afternoon, the snow was melting as the sun shone and the temperature rose. On Thursday, the fawn did not return. The food that Hardy left for him remained untouched. The fawn didn't come back on Friday or Saturday either. He was gone. "That's as it should be," said Mrs. Rosso. "I guess," replied Hardy, but he was disappointed anyway. It would have been nice to have a fawn for a pet. Chapter 8. Hannah. Hannah Rosso sat in the secret room that Candy had found. She'd been going there a lot lately, more than any of the other kids. It was a pretty private place. Her parents still didn't know about it, and as she hung a washcloth on the inside knob of the closet door, the other kids took that as a sign not to enter the room. Hannah was moping. She was moping for a lot of reasons. She was moping because her big mouth had gotten her into trouble in school again. She had merely whispered to someone that Nicole Baruch smelled, and her teacher had asked her to stay after school and then had told her that she would have extra homework that night. She was to write 100 times, "I will not be unkind to others." How had her teacher even heard what she'd said? Furthermore, no one seemed to appreciate Hannah's practical jokes. At home, her brothers and sisters just rolled their eyes. In school, the other third graders said things like, "Hannah's being silly again," or "Hannah's acting like a baby again." They didn't think anything was funny, not even when Hannah left a dead spider on Nicole's desk and Nicole screamed. The worst thing about Hannah's life, though, was her place in the family. She didn't fit in with anybody. She was too young for Abby and Bainbridge and Candy, and everyone else had what Hannah thought of as a special, a brother or sister who was that person's favorite. Woody's special was Hardy and vice versa. The twins had each other, their specials were the best of all, and Jan and Ira were specials. But Hannah had nobody. She was always too young or too old or not a boy. She hung around with Jan and Ira because she shared a room with them, but mostly she thought they were too young for her. Well, Jan was anyway. Ira was too neat. So Hannah had been spending a lot of time in the secret room reading Celia's diary. She wasn't a very good reader, and Celia's handwriting was messy and the ink had faded, but Hannah had read a number of parts. She'd covered the holidays first: Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, and Celia's birthday. Hannah loved birthdays. And she'd read about summertime and about starting school in the fall. She could easily identify with Celia, who wrote that she was often lonely. Hannah knew what it was like to be lonely with lots of people around. It was even worse than being lonely and alone. After Hannah read about starting school, she realized that she'd forgotten to read about Valentine's Day. Did people even celebrate Valentine's Day way back when Celia was a girl, she wondered? She turned to the beginning of February. Yes, Celia was talking about Valentine cards. Hannah skipped ahead to find out where Celia bought hers. Hannah was going to buy hers at Hinkson's, which was in town next door to Zinder's dime store. Hinkson's was a stationery store, and Hannah thought they had very nice birthday cards. She'd bought a gorgeous one for her grandmother when Nanny had turned 70. It had been the biggest card she could find. On the front was a lightly scented heart that said Grandma. Inside were the words, "I love you with all my heart." Candy had said the card was inappropriate because they didn't call their grandmother Grandma, but Hannah knew that it was the thought that counted. And the thought here was that Hannah cared enough about Nanny to buy her the biggest birthday card in Hinkson's. Hannah hadn't had a chance to look at Hinkson's Valentines yet, and she was a little worried. What if Hinkson's didn't carry the boxes of Peanuts Valentines she always bought in New York? They were the best cards of all. They were funny, and they didn't cost too much, and you didn't have to punch them out or do anything to them except sign your name. And best of all, 2 boxes was enough for all of Hannah's classmates and her family. Maybe Celia had bought Peanuts Valentines too. Hannah read carefully, but she couldn't find anything about going to town in early February. She turned back to January 25th and began reading from there. Finally, there it was, a trip into town to some place called the Jersey General Store. But Celia didn't buy boxes of cards. She bought yards of ribbon and lace, some colored pencils, and some paper. Celia was going to make her Valentines. Hannah was impressed until she realized that Celia probably didn't have to make 26 of them. That was how many Hannah would need. 12 for the kids in her class, 1 for her teacher, 9 for her brothers and sisters, 1 for each of her parents, and 1 for Nanny and Grandy, who would be visiting the Rossos on Valentine's Day. Still, maybe Hannah could make her own Valentines too. She could start right away and work in the secret room. It would be fun. There must be plenty of stuff to make cards with right in her house. After all, the Rossos had made their Christmas cards several months earlier. Hannah began to feel excited. She ran downstairs and rooted around in the cabinets where Mrs. Rosso had stored the materials for card making and ornament making and decoration making. She found magic markers, paper, glue, scissors, glitter, scraps of lace and fabric, beads and buttons and doilies and sequins. Amazing! With an armload of supplies teetering in front of her, Hannah returned to the secret room. She set to work immediately and decided to make the cards for her classmates first. Hannah started by folding a piece of paper in half and making a beautiful rose on one side with red sequins and glitter. Then, with a grin, she wrote on the inside, "Roses are red, glue is sticky. Valentine's Day would be great if you weren't so icky." She disguised her handwriting by printing extra neatly and didn't sign her name. At the last minute, she decided it would be more fun not to make cards for particular people, but to just make them, hand them out, and see who got what. So she didn't bother to decide who the card was for either. Over the next week, Hannah spent all of her free time in the secret room making her Valentines. She finished the cards for school and started on the ones for home. A brilliant idea came to her just as she was making the first card for her family. Maybe she could use the cards to hint to her parents how much she and her brothers and sisters wanted a dog. Hannah wouldn't sign these Valentines either, so no one would know they were from her. With a smile on her lips, Hannah began the first card. In a magazine, she found a picture of a cocker spaniel, cut it out, and glued it to the front of a card. She made a border of colored stars and red hearts. Inside, in her best handwriting, Hannah printed, "Come snow or rain or wind or fog, we'd all be happier if we had a dog." Brilliant, simply brilliant. Hannah worked so hard that all of her cards were finished 5 days before Valentine's Day. The only things she needed to buy were envelopes for them. At Hinkson's, she bought 13 white ones and 13 pink ones. Later, she put the school cards in the white envelopes and the family cards in the pink ones. Most of them didn't fit very well, and she had to fold some of the edges in odd ways, but she didn't think that mattered much. On Valentine's Day, Hannah woke up early. Her stomach was jittery with excitement. She loved receiving Valentines, but this year she was also excited about giving out the special ones she had made. She couldn't wait to see what everyone thought about them. Best of all, they weren't signed. If no one liked them, they wouldn't know that it was Hannah who had made them. Although Hannah had awakened early, she got behind schedule immediately. She wanted to look just right for the party at school that day, so she tried on several dresses before she found one she liked. Then she fussed with her hair and lost some more time looking for her gold heart locket. "Come on, Hannah, hurry up," Ira urged her. Ira, of course, was perfectly dressed and ready for breakfast. "I'm coming," said Hannah. "You're going to be late." "I said I'm coming." Ira shrugged and left the room. Hannah finished with her hair and found her locket. Then she ran downstairs and began breakfast. She was only about halfway done when Mrs. Rosso announced, "5 more minutes until the bus comes." Hannah's brothers and sisters were through eating. They began to collect their lunches and books and put on their coats. Hannah quickly swallowed the toast that was in her mouth. "Hannah, get a move on," said Mrs. Rosso. "I'm almost ready." Hannah dashed upstairs. There was no time to brush her teeth. She pulled open her desk drawer, saw the 2 piles of envelopes, and for a moment couldn't remember whether the pink ones or the white ones were for school. She should have written people's names on them, she thought, but it was too late for that now. Finally, she decided that the pink ones must be for school since they were prettier. She snatched them up and raced down the stairs. "Have fun at your party, honey," Mrs. Rosso called to her as she ran out the door. "I will," Hannah called back. Then she hurried after her brothers and sisters who had already reached the end of the driveway. Hannah's third-grade teacher was named Mrs. Pownell. Sometimes she and Hannah got along, sometimes they didn't. Hannah certainly wasn't the teacher's pet. She had played too many practical jokes and forgotten to raise her hand in class too many times. But Hannah liked math and science, and Mrs. Pownell always said nice things to her when she did well on her tests and assignments. So Hannah knew that Mrs. Pownell didn't hate her. At the very beginning of the school year, Mrs. Pownell had told Hannah's class that she especially liked Valentine's Day. Sure enough, during the past 2 weeks, the class had made dozens of decorations for their room. They had studied about St. Valentine, and they had gone to the local historical society to see a display of old Valentine's Day cards. Now, Hannah was sure of this, her class was going to have the best Valentine party in the whole elementary school. The room mothers were bringing punch and cookies and cupcakes and heart-shaped candy. Mrs. Pownell was going to show her students how to play 2 games she'd made up called Love Notes and Heart Races. She was even going to give prizes to the winners. And after all that, Hannah and her classmates would open their Valentines. Taped to the front of each desk in Mrs. Pownell's room was a paper mailbag. Hannah and her classmates had made them in art class. The bags were to hold the Valentines that were delivered during the day. Hannah couldn't wait to deliver hers, and she was glad to find that she was one of the first kids to arrive in her class that morning. "Hi, Jane," she cried. "Hi, Lee." "Hi, Hannah, it's Valentine's Day." "I know. I can't wait for our party. I'm going to deliver my cards right now." "Me too," said Jane and Lee. Hannah walked proudly around the room and dropped a pink envelope into each mailbag. She left the last one on Mrs. Pownell's desk. She was already so excited that her heart was thumping. How would she ever be able to wait for 1:15 when the party was to begin? It wasn't easy, but of course Hannah did manage to wait, and she called out of turn only twice and hid Randy Jamieson's pencil once. At 1:15 the room mothers arrived. They distributed punch and treats. Hannah could see Mrs. Pownell's game prizes on her desk. But what she really wanted to do was empty out her fat mailbag and open her Valentines. All day long her classmates had been walking from desk to desk dropping cards in the bags. When the games were over, Mrs. Pownell said, "And now, class, you may open your Valentines." Hannah let out a whoop. She jumped up so fast she knocked over her chair. But Mrs. Pownell didn't mind. Even she was reaching for her mailbag. Hannah emptied her bag onto her desk. 1, 2, 3, she counted the envelopes. Good. There were 13, one from every kid in the class and one from Mrs. Pownell. She began to open them. She was on her third when she heard Jane say to somebody, "Hey, here's a weird one. It says a cat, a gerbil, a mouse, a frog. Why can't we just get one little dog?" The poem sounded familiar, but Hannah was too busy to pay much attention to Jane. Not until Randy Jamieson went prancing around the room singing, "Come snow or rain or wind or fog, we'd all be happier if we had a dog," did she pay attention. Hannah had written that, hadn't she? But it was for her family. It was one of her pet hints. Uh-oh. Soon all the kids in Hannah's room were comparing the strange Valentines with poems about pets. "Who sent these?" asked Lee. "They're not signed." "Hey," said Jane. "Hannah's Valentines were in pink envelopes. Did you send these, Hannah?" "No," replied Hannah, blushing. Jane frowned. "Well," said Randy, looking suspiciously at Hannah, "did anyone get a card signed Hannah Rosso?" Hannah wished she hadn't picked that day to tease Randy by hiding his pencil. The kids checked through their Valentines. "No," they chorused. "Hannah, these are your Valentines," exclaimed Jane. "How come they all say to get a dog or a cat or something?" Hannah shrugged. She was trying to think of a good excuse when Dr. Morehouse came into the classroom. Dr. Morehouse was the principal of John Bowen Elementary. He was fat and pigeon-toed and always held on to the lapels of his coat while he was talking. While he spoke with Mrs. Pownell, Hannah turned her back on the adults. She stuck her feet inward so that they pointed to each other, and she placed her hands on her dress as if she were holding on to lapels. Then she pretended to have a conversation with someone. "Mow, mow, mow," she said, which was how Dr. Morehouse sounded when he tried to whisper. Jane and Lee began to giggle. So did Randy. So did everyone who could see Hannah. And then the bell rang. The party was over, and Hannah's Valentines were forgotten. But Hannah still had a problem. She worried about it all the way home on the bus. The problem was her other Valentines, the ones in the white envelopes. They had been made for her classmates, and some of them were, Well, it wasn't that they were mean exactly, but Hannah really didn't want to give her grandmother a card that said, "Roses are red, glue is sticky, Valentine's would be great if you weren't so icky." When the bus stopped at the end of the Rosso's driveway, Hannah jumped off. She followed Jan, Ira, the twins, and Hardy to the house. She was busy thinking. What should she do? What could she do? Hannah didn't bother to eat a snack. She took off her coat and went straight upstairs to her room. Mrs. Rosso watched her worriedly. In her room, Hannah left her reading book on her bed. She removed the stack of white envelopes from the desk drawer and took them into the secret room with her. She sat on the floor. "Oh, Celia," she murmured, "what am I going to do now? I can't give these cards to my family. I don't have enough money to buy cards, and I don't have enough time to make new ones." And then she thought, boy, all that hard work for nothing. Her pet hints had been wasted. Nanny and Grandy, Mr. Rosso's parents, were coming over for dinner at 5 o'clock. Hannah looked at her watch. She only had an hour and a half in which to do something. Once her grandparents arrived, she'd be busy with them, with dinner, and then opening more cards. Hannah thought and thought. At last, an idea came to her. It just might work. It was something she could do quickly that would take the place of Valentine's very nicely. Only this time Hannah would be smart. She'd write names on the envelopes and sign her notes. Hannah found a pen and some paper and got to work. Nanny and Grandy arrived promptly at 5 o'clock. Hannah loved her grandparents' visits. When she heard a knock, she, Jan, Ira, Woody, and Candy stampeded to the back door. "Hello, hello," called Grandy. He and Nanny stepped inside, stomping snow off their boots and rubbing their hands together. "How are all my chickens?" asked Nanny. "We're fine," replied Hannah, who never minded that Nanny called her chicken, but if anyone else had ever called her that. Grandy was tall and heavy and ruddy-cheeked, and Nanny was tiny and thin and rose-like. They loved the Rosso kids, and Hannah and her brothers and sisters loved them back. Nanny and Grandy never arrived at the Rossos empty-handed, but Jan was the only one young enough to ask, "What did you bring us?" She jumped up and down. Nanny produced a shopping bag, and the kids peered inside. Hannah saw cards, naturally, and a pile of red-wrapped gifts. "But they're for later," Nanny cautioned. "They go with dessert." Despite her disappointment over the mix-up with her own cards, Hannah could feel excitement returning. Mrs. Rosso was preparing a turkey dinner, and who knew, maybe there would even be more presents. When Abby and Bainbridge added every leaf to the dining room table, 14 Rossos could just barely squeeze around it. They ate roast turkey and mashed potatoes and peas by candlelight. "I know what dessert is," Jan kept saying. And finally it was time to produce the dessert, a white sheet cake decorated with red candy hearts. Hannah thought she had eaten enough cake and candy in school that day to last a year, but now she wasn't sure. Mr. Rosso served the cake, and Mrs. Rosso poured coffee for the adults, and Jan kept asking, "Is it time? Is it time?" At long last, Mrs. Rosso replied, "Yes." There was a scramble as the Rossos reached under their chairs for their Valentine's cards and gifts and passed them out. When they had finished, Hannah found herself facing a pile of envelopes for the second time that day, and 2 presents. She opened the presents first. In Nanny's red box was a tiny gold heart to pin to her dress, and a box from her parents were heart-shaped barrettes. "Hey, Hannah, neat!" exclaimed Hardy suddenly. "Thanks." He held up the Valentine from Hannah, a slip of paper that read, "I owe you 1 week of bed making. Love, Hannah." "Look at this!" exclaimed Faustine. "I owe you 1 week of braided hair. You're going to braid my hair for a week, Hannah? Great!" Everyone began searching for their IOUs from Hannah. Her last-minute Valentines were a hit. Hannah beamed. She had squeaked through this mess okay, but she'd be doing favors forever, and her pet reminders had gone to the wrong people. "Oh well," thought Hannah, "I'll save my pet hints for Christmas cards."